Hello, my name is Charles Webster, and today I'm going to be talking about Chapter 7, which is titled Serving English Learners Who Opt Out of English Language Programs. So, this chapter covers how we as educators can meet our legal obligations to English learners who have been opted out of English language programs and services um, by their parents or guardians. So, before we begin with the key points, let's start with some terminology. So the first uh, term is LEA, and it stands for Local Education Agency. And basically, that refers to a school district or some sort of entity that operates local um, primary and secondary schools. Um, in some cases, LEAs can refer to an individual school, like maybe a charter school, but that's not really as common. And then SEA stands for State Education Agency, and it's typically a state department of education, like the California Department of Education. And it's the state level government organization within each state that's responsible for education. They provide information, resources, assistance on educational matters to school districts, schools, and to teachers. So the first key point before we go forward and explore the different tools is parental rights. So parents, you should know that parents do have the legal right to opt their children out of EL programs and services. Although this decision must be a voluntary one, and they must have full understanding of their child's rights, the services available to the child, and the benefits of those services prior to making that decision. Now, it's also important to note that LEAs cannot recommend that a parent opt a child out from EL programs or services. That's not legal. Um, Now, the next key point in terms of EL status. So, even if a parent has made the decision to opt a child out of EL programs or services, the child nevertheless retains their status as an English learner until they have obtained English proficiency and um, subsequently lose that status. Now, throughout this process, the LEAs have several requirements and obligations. So, LEAs must continue to monitor English proficiency and academic progress of these students, even if they've been opted out through a combination of assessment results, grades, courses taken, observations, attendance, and parent meeting notes. If the student in question doesn't show proper academic growth, the LEA is required to let the parents know in a language that they understand about the EL services available to their student, even if they've opted out. The LEA must also ensure that it continues to fulfill its obligation of meeting the child's language and academic needs throughout this process and make sure that they maintain their access to the general curriculum, even if they've been opted out by their parent. And they must also provide additional training to that child's teachers in EL instructional strategies. Um, Even if the parents have refused to allow their child into an EL program. So this chapter provides us overall three different tools. Two of them are forms and one is a letter. And we can use all of these as templates as future teachers to document and ensure we are properly following the law, but also doing what we can to support and assist our students so that they have the greatest opportunity for success while in our schools and in our classrooms, and also to help to ensure that our students' parents are as informed as possible so that way they can make the best, most beneficial decision for their child. So, tool number one, as you'll see here, is a letter. It's a sample letter to notify parents of their child's EL status and their right to opt out of EL programs and services. So, this letter must be sent out no later than 30 days after beginning the school year, and it must inform parents of um, the fact that their student has been identified as an English learner for participation in an EL program. So it has to include the reasons why the student has been identified and their need for placement in the program. It also has to discuss the child's level of English proficiency, how that has been determined, and the status of the child's academic achievement. It must also include the methods of instruction that are used in the EL program that's being offered, how the program will meet the needs and strengths of the child, how it will help their child to specifically learn English and meet grade level content standards. It's also important that it includes the exit requirement for the program, so that way they know how their child can achieve an exit from the program, detail the rate of transition, the successful rate of transition out of the program, and the rate of graduation from high school in the case of a student who's in secondary school. It also, this is important to note, that the letter should include how the program will meet the objectives of the child's IEP in the case of a child who has a disability. So in all, the letter should contain information concerning parental rights, including their ability to remove the child upon request, give them options that they have to decline to enroll their child into the program or to choose a different program if there is one that's available, and also information that helps to assist parents in choosing amongst the various programs that are offered. So you might be asking yourself, well, what if the student has been identified as an English learner and it's not the beginning of the school year? What do you do then? And it's during the year. So during the school year, LEAs, once they've identified an English learner, the LEA must notify parents during the first 2 weeks of the child being placed in a language instruction program. And they have to include information, the same information, just as they would if it was the beginning of the school year, in a very similar letter to all the information that I just talked about in the slide previously. And remember that the information in this notification, in this letter, must be provided in a language that the parents can understand themselves. Here is a sample of a letter that is posted on the Colorado Department of Education website, and it includes all the necessary information that I've discussed here if you want to pause and take a look. And I have the second half of that letter here. So if you wanted to pause, and you can use this as a template to create your own letter if you wanted to in your own classroom. Now, for tool number 2, this is an example of a form that LEAs could use to provide documentation for legal compliance, proving legal compliance when parents have chosen to opt their child out of the program or services, English language services. So this form, typically, it should inform the parents that their decision to opt their child out of the program, um, what the implications are for that, that they understand that the program is specifically designed to help them reach English language proficiency and meet grade level content standards. So it should also document that parents have been made aware of their child's academic standing and why they've been recommended to enroll in an EL program, and that they are familiar with the programs and services that have been offered by the school, and that the child will continue to be designated as an English learner and annually be assessed until they no longer meet the definition of one. With all of this information and understanding, this documents all of that, and then it should provide them with the option to choose to forego all or some of those programs and services for their student. So basically, we're just proving that they have been made aware of the implications of this decision, and yet they're continuing to do it. Now, there's a possible motivation for this. I know a lot of people would wonder, why would you not want your child to receive services that are beneficial for them? And I feel like a lot of parents and people in general have a stigma around and fear of the EL label. They're afraid that maybe, perhaps, being enrolled into programs like these, they might not be challenged intellectually enough compared to their peers. They might fall behind, not be able to be challenged with materials that will really get them to meet their grade level content standards, and instead there's too much focus on just developing English fluency. So perhaps that's a reason why a parent might um, choose to opt out on one of these forms that I've provided in this presentation. So here is the sample that is actually provided in Chapter 7. It includes all the different statements that I mentioned earlier, that they're aware of their child's English language assessment scores, they're familiar with the programs and services that are offered. Basically, it provides a space for the parents to initial that they've understood all those implications, and then it allows the parents to choose to either decline all or just some of the EL programs or services that have been offered to the child, and a place for signing, dating, and basically we could use this tool to create one of our own notification and documentation in our classroom. Now, tool number 3 is a very similar tool to tool number 2. It's a form, and it acts as sample documentation that can be used by LEAs in case a parent has decided to actually opt their child back into EL programs or services. This form, basically, it should explain what the goals of the EL program or services are, the ones that they're choosing to enroll their child back into. So the parent should be aware exactly of what they're getting their child into. It shouldn't be a question of uh, what the services are that they're enrolling them in. And here again, the parent can choose to opt into all or just some of the programs and services that have been offered. So here in the sample, it's very similar to tool number two. Like I said, it provides a space at the top for you to include your school's name, address, and contact info. Much like the other tools, it must be provided in a language that the parent understands. It should explain what the parent will be, like I said, opting them back into, what the goals of the services and program are, and then it should require the parent's initial signature and the name of the child, date and information. And actually, on this one, it includes the date when they initially opted out of the program, um, and then the date that they're re-enrolling them into the program. So perhaps we might be able to use this template in our future classroom in order to um, re-enroll some of our students into EL services or programs. Now, my conclusion, my takeaway, concluding thoughts from this. So I realize some parents, maybe a lot of parents, may misunderstand the EL label. They might not be sure what it does for their child or how it might affect their child. And using these tools might be able to clear up some of those misperceptions or misunderstandings. Unfortunately, many may view it as a negative label that actually has causes problems or stands in the way of their students' progress, or that they might perhaps the parents may have a flawed understanding of how these programs are specifically designed to help their student. So maybe by providing information like this, using these tools, we might be able to better inform our students' parents so that way they can make better decisions for their child's education to ensure that they're receiving the services and the programs that are necessary to help them and to help them to achieve English fluency and English proficiency. Um, I also feel like this is just as important for us to understand is that we should use instructional strategies that are beneficial to ELs in our lessons when we plan our lessons, because those strategies aren't just beneficial to EL students, but they're beneficial to all students regardless if they're EL students or not. It's just good teaching, as we've been learning about this whole semester. So um, clearly we've learned through the legal part of this at the very beginning, it's our responsibility to educate and to develop the fluency and English proficiency of EL students, regardless if they've been opted out by their parents or not. So that's another lesson that I feel like we should keep in mind um, from this presentation. So I really think that these tools are very beneficial for us as future teachers. We might be able to use them in our future classrooms as templates and samples, but it's also a lesson in that we need to be sure that we're making lessons and creating activities that engage our students, all our students, and especially our EL students, despite whether their parents have decided to remove them from those programs or not. So thank you so much for watching.